when you begin to change the way you look at things, things will begin to change.
What is truth? What is truth? So we're sitting right after the announcement of the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case, where George Zimmerman was found innocent, not guilty. And so our country is divided. I want to say again, but as if it was ever not divided in recent history. Certain folks are jubilant and certain folks are heartbroken. We're going to talk about that today because the truth is something that's very hard for us to put our finger on. I look at Trayvon Martin, I look at George Zimmerman. Two folks really from the beginning, before the issue, were innocent. Good citizens in a sense. Trayvon Martin wasn't a young man that was strapped, carrying around an illegal piece. Zimmerman was a neighborhood watch guy trying to protect his neighborhood. And like all of us, both of this gentleman, the young one and the older one, had their own perspectives, their own worldviews about life and people, I'm sure. From the dress and the attire of Trayvon Martin, he felt more affiliated to a particular segment of society. And George Zimmerman, from some of his comments made calling the police station, felt an affiliation or affinity toward another particular group in our society. But neither of them were really bad people. And see, it would be easier to make a determination if Trayvon Martin was carrying a piece and he was strapped and he was, one of these folks that we want to envision, many young people are in the hood. Or if maybe in Zimmerman's past he was a skinhead or, part of an Aryan supremacy group or something like that, but he wasn't. And so I think it's very important for us to see this particular situation with these two folks who were not really bad people get involved in a conflict, and then one of them end up dead. And the situation itself has helped promote the divisiveness that's been so prevalent in this nation. I suppose more real since Obama became president the first time and all through this process. It's the church. I think the church needs to be the light in the midst of the darkness to see what's really going on. And to recognize there is a terrible confusion in this nation. And as I mentioned on the internet, on Facebook not long ago, that Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman are not really the issue. They are merely the symptoms of what seems to be a cancerous illness that has permeated this nation, this illustrious nation. Is the nation united or untied? You be the judge. And nations do what nations do. Some nations function in evil, some function in semi-evil or whatever, but it's the church, it's the body of believers that are supposed to be the light in the midst of the darkness, but we've bought into the darkness. And the confusion and the chaos and the hate, the negativity that has permeated this nation has as well permeated, has infused the church to that hate. I think we're given, as we travel along this path from history to present and to future, we find this path, this journey lined with benchmarks. Benchmarks are like choices, opportunities for us to stand up and say enough is enough as believers. I think this is one of those opportunities to say enough is enough. I think what I've been ministering over the past few years is that the hardest thing in the world for us to do as human beings is to step outside of ourselves and look at ourselves and judge ourselves. Critically examine who we are and what we are doing and determine if we are correct. It's very difficult. And it is a necessity. I think as believers sometimes all we have then really is to maybe look at Jesus. Remember that bracelet, what would Jesus do? And ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? I think if we could sort of use that to critically examine our mindsets, our lifestyles, and even our choices, we would be changed. We don't do that. We have to. And so to me, this Trayvon Martin, this Zimmerman case is a perfect time for us to begin to introspect and recognize from all sides how we've been sucked into this thing, sucked into the racism, sucked into the gun thing, sucked into the politics, taken off our path, off our course, off what we're supposed to be looking at. And maybe in our defense, if we could call it defense, is the fact that maybe we've never really been on the right course from get-go. Recently, this guy on the internet was talking about the issues of this administration and how, hopefully we're not going to be in a place to lose the blessing of God that we've had on this nation. And I was like, blessing of God? Do you call this a blessing of God? Do you really think genociding millions of Native Americans is blessed by God? Do you really think the enslaving of Africans on this nation for 300 years was blessed by God? This isn't a blessing. I think it's very important for us also to recognize that God, the Creator, Allah, Yahweh, whatever we choose to view God or call God, that must love its creation, humanity. And given that, we should understand that we're to love each other and care for each other. And so not only has the world failed and have nations failed on this planet, and even within the nations, factions within governments fail, but we have failed, all of us as human beings, to recognize, especially as believers, to recognize our function, what we've been called to do, to love one another. We fail, but it's never too late. But we have to recognize that we have failed. How do we stop this thing? You know how embroiled we are in this? There is a tremendous racial issue going on. There's it's stuff that shouldn't be. It's not, and if we really think of it as believers, especially from a God's perspective, it can't be a racial issue. Although we've bought into the world, we've bought into their race system and determined, yes, it is a racial issue. We're talking about welfare, we're talking about entitlements, we're talking about this, we're talking about drug use, we're talking about pants being sagging down the pants, and we're talking about a lot of things that have to do with race, and we're being slick and sly and not using the language, but we're making the inferences, and that's fine for the world. But as believers, we have to recognize, even from John 3:16, God didn't see for God so loved a particular race, for God so loved a particular nation, and that God loved the world. And this is us. This is all humanity. So this illness that we're suffering with, the church, it's an illness of foolishness, of stupidity, because there is no race. There is no racism. This is humanity. This is what we're dealing with right now. So when we fall into the trap of the world, we begin to buy into their hates and their phobias and their negativities and begin to use politics as an example, use money as an example, use welfare as an example, whatever we use this gun issue as an example. We should begin to recognize that we have bought into something that shouldn't be as believers. And to have to be faced with the fact that Trayvon had Skittles and a can of tea. And Zimmerman was just the neighborhood watch guy that got sucked into stereotypes, that got sucked into racism, that got sucked into hate, to where one man ended up dead. And the church is all up in this mess, sided with this guy or that guy. It's not about any of that. I mean it's for black folks need to realize that many black young men die every day. So what is it about this situation? The fact that this young man died and Zimmerman got away with it? That's terrible. No, the sadness is that a young man died. And it really can't get any sadder than that. And so then we look at Zimmerman's situation, just a white guy or a Hispanic white guy, on trial for his life. And so he was found not guilty. And so now he's laughing about it. And if people are laughing about it, how can you laugh? Because the reality isn't his innocence or his guilt or whether he goes to prison or not. The reality is the fact that there is a young man that is dead. And this reality should ring true for both sides. It's not about the trial. It's not about the verdict. That's selfish. That's self-serving. The sadness is that you're alive, that I'm alive, but there's a young man that's not alive. That's it. So it's not about guilt or innocence or who goes to jail and who's not. This man is still dead, and that's what the sadness is, okay? And so we, as individuals, we, especially as believers, need to get something out of it. Many people have died. Many people are always dying. Overseas. In war. In neighborhoods. From drug overdoses and drug use. Domestic violence. Everything that you can imagine. But what makes this different? And this is what I want to challenge believers to believe. If this is different, because this is not simply grasp the attention of this nation, it's grasp the attention of the world. And as believers, we need to see, what are we seeing from this? What is God showing us? What are we seeing about all this? See, it would be easy to justify if we have a real negativity toward Trayvon Martin and sort of applauded this Zimmerman for what went down. I mean, as believers and all, it would be a whole lot easier if Trayvon had a gun, or if he had been a gangbanger, or if he had been any of these things we need him to be to justify our position, but it's not. As believers, on the other side, it would be easier if Zimmerman was a skinhead or an Aryan Nation person, but he's not. So what have we got here? We've got a situation of two men who were not bad, into a conflict of life and death, and one of them died, and it could have very well been the other. One of them just died. One of them was bound to die. One of them had to die. There was too much hate, too much negativity. And we've chosen sides as believers. And when the dust settles and the smoke clears, the reality is both these men, neither of these men were bad men. And we have chosen sides on which one should die and which one should live, which one should be incarcerated or maybe should go free. What does that tell us about believers, ourselves? Why are we in this mess? Why are we in the mix? Why are we choosing sides? Why don't we see from this the confusion and chaos that has infiltrated, that has infested mankind, that we are not well as a result of this? That's the message. We need to be well. This Trayvon Martin case and this Zimmerman case is more an accusation and a condemnation of the church, who we haven't been able to recognize. That the chaos and the confusion that permeates this nation hasn't even been addressed by us. We've tried so hard to be a part of it, especially through this election. We've chosen sides. We've taken sides to be a part of this mess and this chaos rather than standing up and realizing, trying to determine how we can be a part of the fix. And I'm not really letting any religious group off the hook, because there are some religious groups in this nation that won't even be involved in the political process because that's the world. But what are you helping? That's no love. That's no help. For real. There was a sickness that permeates this nation, and it's the believers. And when I say believers, I'm not just pigeonholing it to believers and Christians. I'm saying believers in God, believers in Allah and Yahweh, in peace and love and harmony of mankind. What have we done but choose sides, chosen sides? It's been going long enough. When Pontius Pilate asked that question of Jesus, what is truth? We need to determine and figure out what truth is.